Hello and welcome to a short instructional video talking about the annual administrative conference component as part of the District of Distinction application. Obviously, we still want you to use the linked template provided by ISCA, as this tool is great to kind of provide that structure of the formal meeting held with an administrator and the school counselors. We want one completed template filled out per counselor for your district. We also want that formal meeting and the template signed by the school counselor and the supervising administrator. This meeting is held within the first 2 months of the school year, preferably. So we want to make sure that you're meeting with your administrator towards the beginning of the school year so that you can really tell them the vision you have for the year and talk about the different components of the administrative conference template, which we will go over here in just a minute. All sections of this annual administrative conference template, we want it completed for each member of the school counseling department, with the exception of the year prior's use of time calculator percentages. Obviously, we don't want to discount if we have a district of school counselors that started this process and only have their use of time calculator averages for the current year. So we will make that exception. However, if you are working towards ramp designation, you will want to make sure to have those use of time calculator averages, one from the fall, one from a week in the spring from the year prior, and you will also be doing it for a goal for your current year. The 5-day use of time calculator is also linked here. The first tab is kind of directions for how to use it. You have a sample. And what is really good to know about the sample is that part of being able to earn points in this section is being able to also categorize direct services, indirect services, program management, and beyond in the right categories. And so we really try to break it down here. But if you're having question about what appraisal and advisement is, or fair share responsibility activities, we really recommend that you are working out of the ISCA National Model 4th edition book so that you can see how our national model is defining these areas under direct student services, program planning, indirect student services, non-school counseling tasks, and beyond. Classroom instruction is going to be under instruction, under direct student services, but you have this clear template to be able to do a 5-day week, making sure you put the school counselor's last name, the date of the week that they're doing that, obviously per day. And the great thing about it is that at the end, it's going to create these pie charts for you. Now, being able to share an example, because again, how I learned how to utilize a lot of these templates is by being able to see other exemplary examples so that I could learn, one, how to best categorize, but also two, just knowing what best practice was. So you can see here, this is one that I have done for a week in the fall. So you can see how I categorized. Obviously not putting student names in here for confidentiality reasons, but just putting the grade level, the topic addressed, being able to make sure that I'm putting these X's in the right category. We want to make sure that we are kind of tracking that, because by the end of the week, this is where we get some really great pie charts that give us a lot of information. Obviously, this is broken down by the components of direct services, of indirect services, and the components of program management. But if you come down here, it kind of categorizes it for where you're really looking to see if you're getting that ISCA recommended 80% of direct and indirect services. So obviously we know back here, there's going to be 2 reflection prompts where it says, give one example per counselor of what you learned from the use of time calculator analysis. So really my reflection on this is being able to look at this 1 week. I did not meet the 80% ISCA recommended designation of time for direct and indirect services. I had more time spent in program planning and school support. And so for me, my takeaway from that is that I need to, really take away some time from that program management piece, that program planning, maybe that fair share responsibility. So going back into my week and seeing what I had in that program planning, school support, obviously have already gone through the week. I can't change anything, but how can I make a goal to have more ideal time spent in my week? For me, I would have to change something to be less in program planning and school support and more in indirect or direct services to get to that 80%. So I would write about that in that reflection prompt. And part of that reflection prompt also asks how the school counselor or school counselors as part of that department advocate for reaching and maintaining the 80% of time delivering direct and indirect student services. So I would look at this and begin to kind of take away, how do I advocate for being able to reach 80%? And that is something as a part of our annual administrative conference that we're able to talk about with our administrators, not providing problems, but solutions on how we can take time away, maybe that we are given as fair share responsibilities, or in program planning and school support, that we're able to designate the recommended time in the right areas. So you can see here, school counselor use of time, minimum of 80% of time is recommended for direct and indirect services. So would I need to do any advocating to make sure I'm reaching the 80% here in these two areas, and 20 in program planning or non-school counseling duties? Obviously, we want non-school counseling duties to be as close to 0% as possible. We know that's not always realistic. So what could I do to maintain 80, get this down to 20? We have great administrative support here. I'm very fortunate for that. So I don't have to do a lot of advocating, but I would have to do some intentional planning to do that. And maybe that's something I would write about in that prompt. So coming back to the other expectations, we want to make sure that you use the 5-day use of time calculator for 1 week and provide that completed template. We want each counselor to complete at least one 5-day use of time calculator, which I just showed you an example of, to really document a previous or current school year's use of time and cite that on that template, because that's going to help you be able to write these prompts below. We want you to classify these activities and align it with how the ISCA national model would define direct and indirect services, program planning, and beyond. Being able to dig a little bit more into what the annual administrative conference is. It's a formal discussion between a school counselor or school counseling team and an administrator that takes place within the first 2 months of the school year, when school counselors and administrators can meet and agree on school counseling program priorities, implementation strategies, and program organization. The program is likely to run more smoothly. It's likely to be able to receive more administrative support. It's a great way to advocate during this meeting, and it's more beneficial for kids because you are more likely to produce the desired results for students. There are 6 parts to the annual administrative conference. You will notice on the blank template that you will see the school counseling program's annual student outcome goal. So you will see that pop up, and that is obviously copy and pasted from your annual student outcome goal plan. You will have the school counselor use of time. Remember, we will make the exception if you don't have an average time from the year before, but at least provide one for the current year. Ratio and caseload, those are pretty easy to fill in. What is your school counselor to student ratio? Your caseload, program implementation and plan to address the priorities, and a lot of that includes your action plans, what your plan for professional development is for the school year, and what committees and professional work are you a part of as part of your school building and a part of your district committees. So being able to go through a blank template, again, this is linked. You can kind of see how these 6 parts are listed here. Again, copied from that annual student outcome goal here, making sure you're moving into that school counselor use of time. So obviously, if you do the use of time calculator from the year before, being able to do 1 week in the fall, 1 week in the spring, average those percentages here, being able to make your goal for the current school year based on if you were maintaining that 80% of direct and indirect student services, where you would get to your ratio and caseload, program priorities. This is kind of if you have these documents to share with your administrator at the time of the annual administrative conference in that first 2 months of the school year. An advisory council is part of a component of a full comprehensive national model program for District of Distinction. We are not requiring schools, every school in your district, to have an advisory council or team. But obviously, as working towards a comprehensive program, that would be maybe a next step for you all. Maybe if you have school counseling programs that are wanting to work towards ramp designation after this, advisory council would be the next thing you work on after completing the components of the District of Distinction application. But for this part of the template, you can leave that blank if that is a component you have not fully reached yet as a part of your comprehensive programming. Your plan for professional development, district committee and professional work, your annual budget for your program, people within your building who have these responsibilities and who they're assigned to. And this is where those signatures are important between the school counselor and the supervising administrator, the date that the conference was held. And again, not necessarily a conference that we typically think of that word, a formal meeting, and what your first day of the school year was. So to show you an example of what a completed template looks like, this is kind of my summarization of after completing our school data summary, what I identified as the data priorities. So if you remember, this is from our school data summary that is required as a part of the District of Distinction application. This is where I copy and pasted my summarization of those data priorities listed under question 6. This is where I copy and pasted our closing the gap goal. Again, that's based on the outcome of attendance. This is where I averaged fall and spring from the year before using that tool of the use of time calculator, but then how I made a goal for this year. So you can see, based on what I've already described, how I reflected on that is that I need to take away from program planning time and add it back into direct and indirect student services. So you can see how I made that goal for this current school year. You can see how I do my ratio and caseload. We do it by alphabet. We have 680 kids in our building, but in my A through K, I have a little bit less than exactly half, but I have 331 students A through K. These are some of the action plans and annual calendar that I provided at the time of our annual administrative conference. Our program does have an advisory team. This shows the fall meeting date. We still are determining our spring April date and the proposed members for the year. This is my plan for professional development, how much it might cost. So again, this isn't hard stuff to fill in. And obviously it can be a working document of school district and committees that you might take on or take off during the year, or professional development you might change. Like I signed up for an SEL conference at the University of Northern Iowa in April, but at the time I did this at the beginning of the school year, I didn't know that. So these are the groups, time commitments of the professional work you do. This list is going to look so different between different school counselors, different teams. You might have just a couple committees you're a part of or professional work, and that is okay. This is where maybe you have a good conversation with your administrator. What is our budget for our program? Do we have one? This is good for you to kind of be aware of the people in your building who do help you with the attendance, the data. If you have any people in your building designated as a college and career center assistant, any volunteers as a part of your program. Our first day of school was August 23rd of 2022. And so when we did this, obviously I have it as a PDF file with our signed signatures and the date we had it, but you just kind of plan a time to be able to do that with your administrator. Being able to complete the annual administrative conference component on the District of Distinction application will get you well on your way towards working towards ramp designation. Obviously, we're working from the same national model component with the same templates. If you have more questions, please make sure that you are going to the ISCA webpage, as they have more references and resources that you can look to be able to see great examples.